The ones that truly separated themselves were doing a combination of showing extraordinary business results and actually doing something good for the world. Their purpose was so spot on that it mattered not only to the customers, but also how the brand went about marketing itself. There's a lot of marketers that are afraid to be labeled as greenwashers. They say nothing about some of the great things that they're doing.
Welcome to the Worthy for 30 podcast. I am your host, Eric Tash. Join us as we delve into the world of impactful business leaders who are setting the bar high. Worthy for 30 carefully curates its guests, engaging with business trailblazers who embody the ethos of doing good while doing well. In each episode, we extract actionable tips and wisdom from these visionaries, offering you a blueprint to merge success with social impact. Ready to elevate your business game? Let's dive in and learn how to do good while thriving. Worthy for 30, where purpose meets profit. Welcome to the Worthy for 30 podcast, where we delve into the world of business leaders who are doing good while doing well. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with Deborah Malone, the founder of the Internationalist, where we're going to talk to her about how she and her organization are working with marketers, both here in the U.S. as well as globally, on understanding, things around purpose and mission-driven marketing businesses and thinking beyond just profit. So we're going to dive into some incredible stories and anecdotes that Deborah is going to discuss with us today. So tune in. Very excited for this conversation. Welcome to the show, Deborah.
A pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'd really like to start the conversation, Deborah, with really getting an understanding of your background and your career path and how you came to founding the Internationalist.
Well, you're very kind to ask. It's a pretty simple story because I've done pretty much the same thing my entire life. But I always was fascinated by all things marketing and advertising because it's really at the center of contemporary culture. And I was fortunate to start my first role at Ad Age. And through a number of wonderful circumstances, in my 20s, I was able to start something called Ad Age International, which enabled me to go all over the world and do everything from create local language versions of Ad Age through to events and awards and so on. I did make a segue into the world of television. And then I decided to start the Internationalist, in part because I was trying to create something in marketing that was global, that really was, no matter where you were in the world, you felt that you could embrace it. When I talk about the Internationalist connects the people and ideas in international marketing, it was called the Internationalist because there's really no center of origin. What matters to people in the U.S. might be one thing, but they could also learn from something that's happening in Europe or Latin America or anywhere. That was the genesis of it. And like everything, it evolves.
Totally understand. And you started the Internationalist at the beginning of the 2000s?
It's about 20 years old. So it started as a trade publication. Connecting the people and ideas in international marketing. And then, as I say, like everything, it evolves. There are digital elements to it. It became book publishing. It became awards, events, consulting. And interestingly, one of the initiatives that we're most proud of that I think we'll spend a little time talking about today is our Marketing Makes a World of Difference initiative. Before
we get into that initiative, how did the relationship between the Internationalists and the Association of National Advertisers come to be?
It started a long time ago. I mean, I'd known Bob Liodice since my beginning of my career from my Ad Age days. And there was a moment in time when the ANA recognized that many of its U.S.-based clients were really becoming global, or if not global, they were looking at other markets, other countries outside the U.S. And they wanted to have more content, more opportunities for some of their members to learn about things international. And that's how our relationship began.
And that's also similar to the Internationalist. That relationship has also evolved, right? There's publications, but there's also events. I remember going to an internationalist event that was co-sponsored by the Association of National Advertisers many years ago. I know that ANA has some tentpole events where the Internationalist also attends. So it's really great to see that that relationship grow and evolve over time. And also, before we get into the Marketers Make a World of a Difference initiative, what I also found out was that that was the genesis of the Center for Brand Purpose at the ANA. And as you know, and as hopefully my listeners know, a couple episodes ago, or more than a couple episodes ago, I had Ken Bulau, who leads the Center for Brand Purpose. And when he and I were talking about, some amazing leaders within the marketing world, he immediately suggested you should talk to Deborah. I'm like, wait, I know Deborah in terms of, what the Internationalist is doing, the various initiatives. But in terms of the Marketers Make a World of a Difference, can you speak to, again, that genesis here in the US? Sometimes we may have blinders on and we don't know what other markets are doing. So I'd love to just better understand, again, the genesis and what are some of the examples of the impact that it's had.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And everything begins with a story. The Internationalist does a series of awards every year. One of our longest running awards for the last 16 years is Innovation in Media. What we were finding about 10 years ago was that the Grand Prix winners were not only doing some terrific business projects, but the ones that truly separated themselves were doing a combination of showing extraordinary business results and actually doing something good for the world, whether that was obviously for the planet, whether it was for people in some way. It just dawned on me that through marketing, you can make an extraordinary difference. I sometimes think that marketing is underestimated in that people often consider it to be mass selling and all about being persuasive. But when you started to look at some of these initiatives, you realized marketing makes a world of difference was really a double entendre for us, because not only was the marketing doing some great things, but it demonstrated that within the corporation, the marketing department really was about innovation and about thinking a little bit more broadly. And we started this really, we came up with this concept before purpose was even a word that was used. And it ultimately evolved to purpose being something quite trendy. But the thing that was rather interesting about it was we started by showcasing case studies, literally case studies from around the world that were doing just remarkable things, whether it was initiatives in India that were helping prepare young women for the workforce, whether it was, and again, often quite poverty-stricken young women and teaching them perhaps English so they might get better jobs. There's so many initiatives. There's remarkable ones from places like Turkey for a dishwasher detergent called Finish. And what they did to demonstrate to a country that was becoming water poor and drought ridden, just how a brand could not only save them water, but how the brand was investing in bringing back lakes, in doing just extraordinary things.
Those are extraordinary things, thinking beyond, just marketing as a means to an end. It's really telling the story. You're mentioning storytelling. The great marketers are great storytellers. And, Finish is a dishwashing product here in the US. I think it's owned by Reckitt Benckiser.
That's correct. Yeah.
It's a, dishwasher detergent, but we don't think, again, this is what the Internationalist is doing, is it's giving us a view into the world outside our own to understand that there are certain markets where, again, it's water poor or drought ridden. And this is what the brand is doing. Yes, they're selling a product, but they're thinking beyond just selling a product. Like, how do we serve the communities? So, Deborah, my next question is like, how are you able to curate these stories or curate these examples of amazing work that these marketers are doing around the world?
Well, I mean, you're always on the lookout for them. That's something, it's a passion of mine. I mean, I think you have to be very dedicated to looking for, whether you call it the purpose in things or how people are doing good. I mean, we have the good fortune of being around for 20 years and having awards where we get case study entries. I mean, we've had literally thousands and thousands of case study entries that we've cataloged, and that's something that also the ANA is quite interested in that they do want us to share some of those case studies, so that marketers, wherever they are, can learn from them. But I think that we're always looking for them, and I'm always talking to people about these initiatives. We also do a tremendous amount of research on these issues. We're constantly doing a series of different surveys on, we'll call it the evolution of purpose. Sometimes it might be, in your intro, you mentioned profits. We might be talking about, in a recessionary time, what is the balance between purpose and profits? There's always shifts that are going on, and there's always subtleties. There's purpose gaps that we notice. There's purpose washing, of course. There's what some people refer to as the green hush. And there's now, as we incorporate so much more of sustainable thinking, there's all sorts of new business models that are focused around brands thinking about the circular economy, particularly when you think about, clothing brands or fashion brands as well. And how many of those, given the seasonality of them, wind up in the dumpster? And, what do you do? So can marketing solve those problems? I think that, again, within the corporation, marketing is usually imbued with a sense of innovation. And, perhaps they're working, with a lot of other departments, but they can make a difference.
Absolutely, they can. And it's funny that you mentioned the circular economy. A couple episodes previously, you're based in Manhattan?
In part, yes.
So I had Tiffany Kariakos, the founder and CEO of Designer Revival on the Upper East Side. Her store has the largest inventory of secondhand or lightly or gently used Louis Vuitton handbags, because again, she is speaking to that need. You want something that's high fashion, but also, there's a lot of waste in the ecosystem. So how do we, again, before you throw that out, should you consign? Should you, again, not pay it forward, but should you sell it to the next person who will also find value in that same item? One thing that you mentioned, again, around purpose and all these great case studies that you're able to compile and curate and to disseminate, across the Internationalist and its partners. I one time had a boss who was all about implication and application, meaning, like, what does this mean? How do I take away those important nuggets from what I heard from that case study, and how do I apply it to my work? How do I apply it to my business? Are there any anecdotes that you're able to share from someone who's seen a case study presented by the Internationalist and said, you know what, it may not be the same industry or the same category, but I can definitely take bits and pieces from that case study and formulate our thinking and formulate an execution for our business?
I think that is the point of case studies. Not one is ever going to be an exact fit. I think the marketing mind, is about looking at how it's relevant to them. I can certainly talk about influential case studies that I think affected a lot of people in terms of just how they began to think about things. I'll give you one that's a simple one. It's from Spain, and it was a car company. And what they did was to encourage people to think green in the summer. Instead of paying to park at the beach, what you could do is you could put your recycled plastic bottle into the parking meter, and it would, you would then be able to enter the parking area. Now, that's something very simple, and it may not be a direct correlation to the car. And this, of course, was an e-car, so that might have at least talked about sustainability in some way. But it certainly made people smile. It also made people feel that they were doing something good. I mean, there's just so many things that people can be creative about. I mean, the issue, though, becomes you can look at all these case studies and be inspired, but whatever you choose to think about, it has to be authentic, of course, to the brand. And, people particularly today can see through it. If it's just, trying to do something that smacks of being current because it's good. That's part of the whole purpose exercise, to often go back to your origins and trying to figure out what it is that you're really offering, so that when you come up with some of these initiatives that they're certainly true. They ring true to all. And, sometimes you can get very clever and fun with it all.
In terms of, you mentioned two things, authenticity and purpose. So from your experience, again, working with, all these various marketers, how do you prevent inauthenticity and purpose washing? Like, and so whatever you're doing gets across and really resonates with that intended consumer.
It goes back to being very serious about understanding purpose. And, you can go through a lot of nuances, but I think that when you get very deep on purpose, it should be the kind of statement and the kind of belief that can rally your internal staff, rally all the people that you deal with. But it also can be quite aspirational. It almost is making a movement in the way that things are expressed. And I also think that when you get it right, and it's not easy to get it right, but when you get it right, it's almost magical because it informs every possible decision that you make. Suddenly, it's not about, well, should we do this? Should we not? Should we respond to this incident, in social media? Should we do? You have this center which says, well, in this case, I think it's right for us to take a stand. But in another case, I think that's not, I hate to use the term, but that's not our swim lane. You know what I mean? That's not what we do. And as I say, it's the getting it right that I think that everyone has to go through. And it's not an easy process. It's more than just coming up with a mission statement.
Right. It has to feed into all the different facets of the organization or the brand. Like the one brand example that comes top of mind as you're talking is Dove and body positivity and the sketches, where again it felt again like they really listened to themselves and listened to their consumers and really understood all the different facets of their message that they want to get across to their consumer. They're not just, again, at the end of the day, they're selling soap functionally, but aspirationally and inspirationally, it's all about, embracing your body and the body that you're given, and that positivity comes in all different shapes and forms and sizes. It has become a case study in of itself, where, you go to different, at least at the time, I just remember going to various marketing conferences, and they always pointed to Dove body sketches. And I know Procter and Gamble and some of their brands was all about encouragement, specifically around female encouragement. I remember, like, how do you throw like a girl? And you had a young woman, what she believed was throwing like a girl. So again, it was all around that authenticity and around that aspirational, motivational aspect. But again, it came from the top down in terms of how that brand was really presenting that story to their consumer.
Well, I think that you bring up some good examples because what Dove has actually evolved beyond that. What's great about Dove is they've stuck with the real beauty theme for a very long time, and now they're really taking it to a level of activation. One of our recent case studies is, and you may have seen it, it's heart-wrenching, but it talks about how young girls are affected by sometimes toxic social media issues, about their weight, about their size. And in one example, how they become anorexic and are hospitalized. And I think that they've taken it to really a level of activism, but that's sometimes what happens when you have a program that evolves over time. And I think, they're certainly to be applauded. But, you take something like a wonderful company like Procter and Gamble. And I don't think we always see what they're doing in other markets. Tide is a great example, particularly in a market like India. And Tide did something quite extraordinary, and there's been a number of generations of them. But they did something about how it is traditional in India that women tend to do the laundry. But they did an extremely thought-provoking piece where a father is looking at his adult daughter who is running to work, dealing with the kids. Her husband works as well, but when he gets home, he just is sitting watching television. The father of this daughter suddenly realizes that he could make a difference if he helped at least do the wash, and then actually encouraged his son-in-law to do the wash as well. And that's quite an extraordinary message from Tide in a country like India. And I think just seeing a lot of that is inspirational.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Like what you see, again, how do you replicate that at a micro level for yourself? Yes, I think that's incredible what Tide was able to do. Again, tapping into the cultural nuance of a country like India and be able to present it, and again, in an authentic way. One thing that I'd love to touch upon is the decision making process with all these great campaigns and case studies. You mentioned Tide. Do you have an understanding of the decision making? Did that happen from was there a global CMO? And then here's our overarching campaign, and we're going to push it out to the markets, and the markets have not carte blanche, but latitude in terms of how they want to execute the campaign?
I think it varies for each country. I'll mention Unilever first, not because we're trying to do a Unilever versus P&G, but they have written about this, or they've announced this quite a bit. They've gone, certainly when Paul Pullman was the global CEO, who also had worked at Procter and Gamble, he really believed that no brand should exist unless their purpose was so spot on that it mattered not only to the customers, but also how the brand went about marketing itself. There's been a number of iterations in that, but I think it's a combination. I think generally what happens is there has to be a strong feeling within the corporation that this is important and that it's going to be embraced. And then I think that generally the brand people and the associated marketing people really, take that to work. They probably know the brand and their customers better than anyone else. And what's interesting now, to switch over to P&G, they're very good about taking an idea and adapting it for each market. So obviously Tide here isn't the same story as in India, but it doesn't mean that somehow deep down there are some roots that might offer the storytelling in a very different way.
No, that's super interesting. Like understanding again, how Unilever and Procter and Gamble, execute these different campaigns in different markets. Well, you also touch upon very interestingly about purpose and is that yes, a lot of these brand decisions happen within the brand team, the brand framework within the organization, but you also touched upon that purpose really pervades all facets of the organization. Not just marketing, it's finance, it's sales.
Well, I think it's cultural. I think if you have a strong corporate culture and you've done the homework on really embracing this being a purpose-led organization, then I think what happens is it permeates the organization, but there has to be work done to do it. I mean, there has to be training on it. There has to be language that makes sense. People have to feel it. It can't just be fed to them because everyone is an ambassador for a brand or a company. That's what I think makes a difference. I mean, people will often talk about companies with strong corporate cultures like Apple or Patagonia. And certainly Patagonia has lived up in many ways to what their purpose is and how they how they present themselves to the world in all of their actions. And now, of course, they repair their clothes for free. I mean, you can buy reconfigured Patagonia clothing, and they are designed to last a very long time. It's almost like trying to make a movement.
Yes, it is like trying to make a movement. Like Patagonia is like a very interesting story because I've heard of Patagonia. I've seen Patagonia out in the wild, and then when I heard about the founder, I think he bequeathed his fortune to environmentally friendly, forward-thinking nonprofits and causes. That guy, and then and there was like this groundswell, like, oh my goodness, like this guy is worth, this person's worth, has a massive net worth, but he's going to leave a legacy of making the world, literally the world, a better place. And then you saw the chatter, at least I saw some of the chatter on social media saying, oh, I'm going to support Patagonia. I'm going to buy Patagonia products because of what the founder has done. And then you hear some of these anecdotes of, if you have a worn piece of Patagonia clothing and you're able to return it free of charge. And again, it's not just, one person. Again, it permeates a larger organization. And I think REI also operates in a similar fashion where on Black Friday, I think they close all their stores to allow their employees to spend that time with family. It's again, this more holistic approach to purpose. Again, if we're going to be supportive of the environment, we want to also be supportive of our employees and our whole organization. As a byproduct or as a corollary, consumers who frequent these businesses, see that.
Well, it doesn't have to be that grand. It's just knowing what you stand for and living up to it. But as I've said a couple of times, it often takes a bit of work to figure that out. And I think that sometimes purpose gets, like so many words in marketing, it's overused. It has certain associations with it. Like everything else, when people don't get it right or kind of slap a Band-Aid on it to say, well, we've checked the box on that, we're purposeful, we're giving some money to charity and we're doing this. It doesn't come with the same decision-making process. So people see through it. But one shouldn't think that it's all about saving the world. Sometimes it's about doing what you do well and figuring a way to support the communities you serve and to create the best product you can and do the best that you can in the world. I mean, there are so many examples. I know someone who I've known through the years who wound up starting a small company. It's called DNA Vibe. It's a product almost like a heating pad with some ultraviolet light, but apparently it does more than heat. It actually interacts with the DNA to create greater healing. And this gentleman has become a good friend over the years, and he's a smart marketer, and he is in Colorado and has gotten the U.S. ski team to endorse it. But he's also done some other things that are quite extraordinary. He's created, it's something that he calls a lamp, but he's created almost a small container where these products can be manufactured anywhere in the world. So he believes that everybody needs this physical help, and there's no reason why a small village in Africa, for example, couldn't take one of these pods and create a business for themselves by manufacturing this. So there's lots of ways of looking at this. And I think you're only limited by your imagination and your commitment to wanting to do good and do good business.
Right. And it starts, yes, there is hard work involved, as you said. And I think and it's funny, in my last conversation, with Jessica from Raised by Us, there's a gap between intent and impact. And sometimes you have this great intent, but you really don't see that impact. But what you're saying, Deborah, is yes, it requires work. You're not going to see immediate results, perhaps. So again, that as quickly as you thought. But, you look at a grand example like the Dove body positivity, and that was an evolution. They started and they evolved over time.
And they made some mistakes along the way. And I don't bring that up to be negative. I just bring it up to say that if you're, trying to be innovative, sometimes you try too hard. I recall for a while they came out with, I think, body washes in different body shapes. And that was going, that was probably going a little too far, because, it didn't work, and they got the social media commentary. They pulled it. And it's a bigger mistake not to try things. But again, we're human. We can't always get it right. There is a statistic that I have. I was just connecting with someone just earlier this morning. The statistic speaks to what you just said. 92% of consumers aspire to live sustainably, but only 16% are actively changing behaviors. And I think that's why marketing is so important. Yes, that does speak to a gap between whether you call it intention and action. I call it maybe stated purpose and actually doing what you say you're going to be doing. I also think it speaks to why marketers play such an important role in this, because who better than marketers to help with offering convincing and authentic information that might actually change behavior. That was part of the green hush. Now, I first heard the term the green hush through the World Federation of Advertisers, the WFA. And they were talking about how there's a lot of marketers that are afraid to be, labeled as greenwashers. And they say nothing about some of the great things that they're doing. And it's not even saying some of the great things that you're doing. It's knowing how to do it. And that's not easy. There's a company that I work with in Denmark who I have the highest regard for, because they are a product that's 100% sustainable. Yet, until they went through the exercise of figuring out their purpose in terms of marketing and communications, even for a company that was 100% sustainable, they didn't even communicate it in a way that would touch people's lives when it was doing such good in the world. So, I mean, it's very interesting to see the role that marketing plays or can potentially play.
Right. It just it reaffirms its purpose of how do you communicate, again, that gap between I want to do good, I want to be sustainable versus actually being sustainable. Again, that marketer's job is, how do you make it super simple? How do you convey that information in a super simple, non-friction way? Because I think, with anything, on an individual level, just imagine, you have a habit that you want to cut out. It takes at least 30 days of consistency of cutting out that bad habit and replacing it with a good habit. So, James Clear did a really good job in Atomic Habits of laying out, a framework that was very simple for anyone to pick up and to implement. Here's, from a business standpoint, is how do you make the message super simple and clear with, okay, you want to do well, you want to do good, and these are the steps that you need to follow in order to follow through on that promise and intent. Deborah, this has been an incredible conversation, and I think we can talk a lot longer. I think just to sum up, I think some really key points in terms of, if you want to be purpose driven or purpose led, you want to build a sustainable business, it requires work, but it also requires, at least it starts with really listening and really understanding what is needed in order to authentically tell that purpose or that sustainable story to your intended consumer. And anything in life, again, we're human. There might be some bumps on that road, whether to the starting line or even if you do start and you start evolving, there might be some hiccups, but don't be deterred. Continue to go, persist, learn from those mistakes, refine, and keep going. And then lastly, I think it's that evolution. You start, I think it requires a start. And then over time, as you continue down this journey, understand that there are ways that this purpose or the sustainability message or action can take or refine its way into different forms. or shapes and sizes. So I think, again, if you want to add to that.
Well, things always evolve. I mean, and society changes. Yes, purpose should certainly be a North Star. And I'm not suggesting that, you have to go ahead and change it every few years. But what I am suggesting is to be relevant, you also have to understand what's going on in the world, which has a lot of other challenges. And actually, if we got into this conversation a little more, there's a lot of dispute on what that does mean in terms of a corporation's responsibility.
Totally understand, especially, yes, 2024 is an election year. And I imagine a lot of, specific topics and issues are going to be coming up, should brands or companies, jump in the fray. Again, if there's a hot button issue. In terms of
if you've got your purpose right, you'll know what to do.
If you have your purpose right, yes, that is very, very true. Mm-hmm. Deborah, for the folks who want to learn more about the Internationalist, where can they find you and the organization?
Well, certainly our website is the-internationalist.com. A good place to also start is internationalistmagazine.com, where you'll find a lot of articles. And you can search under Marketing Makes a World of Difference or any topic you like. So that's probably a good starting point.
Excellent. And if anyone has questions, can they reach out to you via email, LinkedIn? What's the best?
Sure, LinkedIn is easy. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to include those links in the show notes when I publish this conversation. Deborah, again, really appreciate your time this evening. Really, again, insight filled. It's got me thinking. I imagine it'll get the listeners thinking as well in terms of how they can formulate purpose and sustainability within their business and within their organization.
So, well, you're very kind, and I appreciate everyone listening to me while I'm in the midst of a cold.
That's okay. All right. Thank you, Deborah.
Bye now.
Thank you for joining this episode of the Worthy for 30 podcast. Stay tuned for more insights from impactful business leaders. Don't miss out. Follow us on all podcast platforms to catch every conversation.